Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater, and I'm joined today by Tor Mogensen from TC, all the way from Denmark.
Yes.
And we are here to introduce you to the SpectraComp bass compressor pedal. So the third of the three pedals that you're introducing at Winter NAMM is actually a bass pedal.
Hence the bass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It magically appeared in your hand there.
And I have bass players around the world going like, that's so wrong, and a guitar player. But, you know, bear with me. It's for demonstration
Because we're here to talk about a pedal, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And what pedal do we have?
Well, we have the SpectraComp bass compressor. And around half a year ago, we announced or launched Hypergravity, which is a guitar compressor. And SpectraComp is really using the same core algorithm, which is taken from something called the MD3, which is an algorithm we invented for System 6000, which is the super expensive mastering tool that's used both in music production but also in film production to basically keep everything at proper levels and, you know, make sure that everything sounds great without being, you know, noticeably compressed.
Right.
So we basically made a version of that algorithm, but tweaked it so that it sounds great for guitar, and now also for bass.
Oh, wonderful. And it couldn't get any simpler to operate.
It's very, very simple. But the interesting thing is that even though it looks super simple, behind the scenes or inside the pedal, there are literally hundreds of parameters going on. Because what really makes SpectraComp stand apart is the fact that it's a multi-band compressor. So there's really 3 individual compressors running at the same time. And the benefit of that is, let me see if I can explain that. If you have a regular compressor, you're basically compressing the signal, the entire signal, to the same amount. And the problem with that is that there's radically different levels of energy on the low and the high strings of a bass or a guitar for that matter. So plugging in the low strings compared to the high string, you can even hear it. There's less level on the high strings.
Right.
And the problem is that a compressor is actually getting triggered by the level. So if you set the threshold, which is basically the place where the compressor triggers, if you set it to match the low strings, you don't get enough compression on the high strings. Vice versa, if you set it to match the low strings, the high strings, sorry, then you get too much compression on the low strings.
Right.
And it's always this dilemma of getting the proper balance. And with a regular compressor, it's really, really hard to find that balance. You'll typically try to match it to the low strings so that, you know, you don't have too boomy a low end. And that means that the high strings really don't come into their right properly.
Right.
But with a multi-band compressor, you can basically compress, if not per string, then close to that. On SpectraComp, we have 3 different compressors running, which is basically one for the low end, one for the mid-range, and one for the high strings.
Okay.
So enough with the talking. Hopefully I can play a little bit and you can hear the difference.
Sure.
So an easy way to hear this is playing harmonics while at the same time having the low strings ringing. So I'll do something like this. And then I can turn on the compressor and you can hear the difference. You can hear how suddenly the dynamics just disappear altogether.
Right, right.
So that's what a compressor is really great for bass. It's just kind of taking the entire sound and kind of, you know, making it whole and having that kind of sparkly high end be there in there as well, not being overpowered by the low end.
Right, right. You can really hear how the balance between the low string and the 2 harmonics really evens out. It really becomes much more stable across the whole thing. And that's the same if you're popping and
exactly,
you know.
And I wouldn't presume to start playing funk bass at all. But, you know, if I were to do that, you know, it's the same thing when you do the hammer-ons with the thumb. They have a tendency without a compressor to be much louder than the popping. So when you add the compressor, you get a more even sound across the frequency spectrum.
Right.
And again, I mean, as you mentioned before, the pedal is very, very simple. Actually, it's more simple than pretty much any other compressor pedal out there because there's really only one knob. And typically on compressors, you will find 2 knobs. You will find one to control the amount of compression and one to control the level, because on compressors, when you add more compression, you also have to add more level to kind of match up for that.
Right.
But because we can do all sorts of trickery inside the pedal, we can actually basically marry those 2 at the same time and make sure that the level is the correct, which is basically the same as if you weren't plugged into the pedal at all, no matter how much you gain. So I can kind of show you that here. So now it's at the minimum position. So we're adding compression, but the level stays the same. And now, so it just makes it super, super easy and simple to use.
Right, right.
Another thing, I mean, even though it's so simple, as I mentioned before, there's literally hundreds of parameters inside. And if you want to start, nerding out and trying to be a little bit more in control of what's going on, there's plenty of opportunities because SpectraComp is part of our TonePrint range of pedals. So that means that we're starting to work with all these really cool bass players to create tone prints for them, or for the pedal.
Right.
Meaning that you can get, cool artists dialing in the compressor exactly the way they like it, and you can get that sound as well. We already started adding a few. Ida, the bass player from Prince's band, has done some, and we have a whole bunch of artists lined up at NAMM here in a couple of days or in a week or so that'll do that as well.
That's great.
And on top of that, if you want to go really crazy, you can also download the editor, which you can hook up. You can hook up the pedal to either a Mac or a PC or an iPad, and that gives you access to all the parameters that we use in the engineering department to actually design the sound. So basically, you become a pedal designer, and you can basically dial in the compressor to sound exactly the way you want it. But there's a lot of parameters in there. So,
but you can also use that to save different settings, and then you can use your phone
to basically beam them directly in there, and it's super easy to just hold it over the pickups and just beam the sounds right in there.
So you can kind of create a library of your own.
You can do that
settings if you want
and, to. And to make things a little bit more, easy for guys who are not that familiar with compressors. Inside the editor, there's also a bunch of templates, as we call them, that are basically, here's something great for, slapping bass. Here's something great for guys who play with a pick, and so on. So you can use that as a starting point and then kind of tweak it from there.
Right. All right, very cool.
So it's, very simple pedal if you want it to be, but also incredibly complex and, totally customizable if you want it to be that. And something in between with the artist stuff, you can basically, pick your favorite bass player and just load his sound or her sound directly into the pedal.
Right.
So it brings a lot of different opportunities.
I'd like to thank Tor for making the trip, coming in from Denmark to show us this great pedal. We appreciate you being here, my friend.
I'm always glad to be here.
Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
And if you have questions on the SpectraComp or any other TC products, be sure and give your Sweetwater sales engineer a call. I'm Mitch Gallagher.